Reports coming out about what the Texans coulda, woulda, shoulda done on draft day. And because it is a slow news day, never really a slow news day, but slow-ish news day. And we are awaiting the arrival of the rookies. We'll get into this. Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. It is SNL. Subscribe to the channel, like, right along, all that. Be sure to check out the locker room. We tried to get to know this USC duo that the Texans did select. Lay this out for me, Cody. There's a few voices that we listen to when reports come out from national folks regarding the Texans. Albert Breer is among one of those guys, and he has some interesting information in his latest piece.
Yeah, so Breer's latest, he goes through I think 10 things that he really likes from the league, and there were some really interesting topics there. It kind of hooked me with Arch Manning. But his number 2 thing was he went inside the James Pierce Jr. trade that the Atlanta Falcons made. Now, obviously, that trade was made right after the Houston Texans made their trade with the New York Giants and moved out of 25 into the second round. And then the Rams at 26, they moved out of the first round. They got a first-round pick to move back. Now, they moved much further back, but Breer went inside with the Falcons on exactly how that went down. And basically, they started calling, and they started with Denver at 20 to see if Denver wanted to give up and move out of 20, and that Falcons would come up out of the second round into the first round so that they could draft James Pierce Jr. Denver said no thanks. So the Texans were one of the teams that they ended up talking to. They talked mostly, according to Breer, the Texans, the Rams, and the Ravens. And the Ravens basically told them to shove it from the very first moment they talked to them. So really they talked mostly to the Rams and to the Texans. And what I found very interesting about this was Atlanta sort of tricked themselves into thinking, well, this is basically a first-round pick. This is what we're using a first-round pick for next year in this year's draft. Like, that was their reasoning. So they didn't care what they had to pay. They were ready to pay. But obviously they wanted a little bit extra on the back end because we saw with that trade. The Rams ended up trading a late third-round pick, but they got the future first. The Texans, they did not get a future first. They got 2/3 basically as the extra capital in the swap. And so I went through and I just kind of looked through the way Breer talked about it. And basically what it came down to is I laid it out here. The Texans had the offer with the Falcons on the table, but it would have cost them their 89th overall pick to do it because the Falcons were adamant in this trade back that the team was going to make, that they also had to give up something late day 2. Ultimately, the Rams did. The Texans said no. So with the Giants trade, they had the 5 picks on day 2, as well as the future third. If they make that Falcons trade, Landry, they still have 3 picks on day 2, and they have a future first, as I've kind of laid it out here on the screen. So just looking at this before we get really into the back and forth, should they, what players did they miss out on this? Or just looking at this, the picks with the Giants trade, the picks if they made the trade with the Falcons, did they make the right trade?
See, I think there's a couple of factors here, and it is SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Before we get into this, let's swarm the super chat. Shout out to everyone on this rainy-ass Houston day. I think it's finally raining. It felt like it was going to rain for 6 hours. I think it's finally raining. You ain't never
Swarm.
Stone Cold Alone 5 times. Shout out to you, my friend. He is grinding per usual. Shout out to you. Christopher says he's observing in Charleston, South Carolina. Shout out to you, mi amigo. And then Christopher Caldwell says he's in Houston. He's been all over this content trying to figure it out. Zombie ate my bra on the soup says we have a segment talking about the undrafted free agents. See, here's what I want to do. I want to see them. And I don't need to see a lot of them. I want to just see them in front of me before I break down the undrafted free agents. So we'll do something on them this week once we see them. But as far as just breaking down the undrafted free agents, Cody could probably tell you a little bit about the massive human that they got at tight end out of Texas Tech. But just like with the rookie minicamp, what we see, we will break down the undrafted guys as well and talk about how kind of they look once we see them. So we got you there. A-Town Jack says, afternoon, Landry, Cody. and friends.
Thank you.
Shout out to y'all as usual. So I think there's a couple of things that you got to factor in when looking at this, because if you just look at it and you say, okay, this is what the deal looks like, then a lot of people, the answer would say, yeah, they should have taken the Falcons deal. Sure. Here's the problem.
And it's worth noting, just one more thing to add in there, on most draft value charts, from the Jimmy Johnson to the newer one that we think people use, the Falcons trade is a overall more valuable trade, slightly, by like 1,000 grading points, or so to speak.
Now, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing.
100 grading points, excuse me.
Yeah, well, they don't go by the Jimmy chart. I know Caserio likes to mention it when it favors him, but he definitely doesn't go by it. He mentioned it after the draft. It's funny. He'll mention mock drafts every once in a while and then say it's all garbage. And then he'll mention the Jimmy chart when it shows that they won. Right. But he'll say that they don't go by it whenever they don't win. So I take that with a grain of salt. But here's the thing that
on a lot of charts, the Falcons side is more valuable.
So here's the thing with the Texans, though, that I think needs to be taken into account. And it's kind of, first of all, I don't think they were trying to trade for picks next year. And that was one of the things that Dallas was talking about, was they didn't want picks next year. And I think the Texans, based on the moves that they made, they were willing to trade future picks. They didn't want to trade picks this year. The other thing is they made the Tunsil trade, which was essentially stockpiling picks for next year in the large majority. You got more draft picks next year in the Tunsil trade, including an extra second and stuff. So I don't know that they were really looking to stockpile picks. Also, they probably really, really liked somebody in that range. And as a result of the trade they actually made, they were able to acquire 2 wide receivers, which add to the wide receiver room, add different elements. And quite frankly, if you make the trade with the Giants, and let's say you end up with just one of those guys, then wide receiver automatically becomes a big need next year. So you're essentially trading back. And let's say you don't get Noel, and then Christian Kirk leaves. You're going to need to find someone that can do some work in the slot. So I think because they had the extra picks, and because they were able to do what they did, I don't have any problem with them not making the Falcons trade. I also think the Falcons are such an outlier because they're just such a dumb organization that has no grasp of assets.
Yeah, they clearly they did some mental gymnastics to make it feel like they got good value on their trade when they got taken to the bank and held up at gunpoint, basically. So here's what I would say. Just looking at the overall, just like, here are the picks, here's the value of it. Like, my conversations heading into this year's draft was help the 2025 team. So when I landed on just the overall, just like how many swings do you get to help 2025, I liked the Giants side, the trade that they actually made, more than the Falcons. I certainly am not going to sit here and tell you that 2 third-round picks are more valuable than a first-round pick. That'd be stupid. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But if you tell me 2 third-round picks, keeping an additional third-round pick, all of those coming in this year's draft, I could see how the Texans very much viewed that as more valuable than ultimately having that future first that they would have had if they'd made that trade with the Atlanta Falcons. So I certainly understand it from that standpoint. And I would also say, Landry, I have no idea, and like we can guess and we can estimate, I have no idea what they would have done if they had made that Falcons trade, because are they moving around? Are they moving out of 46? Are they sticking and picking at 46? Or what are they doing with 58 and 79 as well? Because it's worth noting, they moved 99 pretty quick into day 2. I mean, they moved up from 58 to 48 and drafted Ursary. So like they moved that pick. They moved back from 89. Like, it's hard to kind of guess exactly what they would have done with 46, 58, 79, so on over on the Falcons side. And I will say, I do strongly believe they would not have gotten Jaden Higgins if they had made the trade with the Falcons.
Yeah, that would have been a tough get for sure.
I don't know how they would have ended up with him, because if you believe Ian Rappaport, multiple teams moved after Higgins came off the board because he was their target.
And Noel as well. So yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if, and I'm just speculating here, I wonder if 46 and 58 would have been Ursery and Knoll. Just because they went up to 48 to get Ursery in real life. In the imaginary Falcons trade, maybe they just take Ursery at 46 and then take Knoll at 58.
Who knows? It's it's an interesting look when it comes to it. So are you second guessing Caserio? Let us know. It is SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. We'll get a look at the rookies later this week.
And I would say with putting the piece of the puzzle that you were able to reveal that, they were more than willing to discuss future picks, and they didn't really want to dump any picks this year in any conversations. That really shows you exactly how valuable the Texans viewed not only the small move back, which was 9 picks versus the 20 pick move back, but also not getting rid of that additional 3rd round pick. So when you factor in what Landry's talked about here on the channel and what he talked about, that night with, hey, if they'd had a conversation with Dallas wasn't interested in future picks and the Texans really weren't interested in trading current picks. So when you factor all those things in, it becomes pretty clear why the Texans didn't make that Falcons move.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm a little bit confused about is, and these are for trade backs. These aren't for trade ups. These are for trade backs.
Yeah.
If you're wondering, the trade up, we have no idea. This is Atlanta when they got their second pick, and they ended up getting the 1st rounder. For anyone who may be confused by that info, the other thing is, it's one thing to stockpile picks when you're in a rebuild. And I'm not saying the Texans don't want to acquire assets, and they have a nice chunk of draft picks next year, but they need to get better this year.
Mm-hmm.
And they need young guys right now. And that's really, there's kind of a balance between these two things. Like it's not, I get why the Rams would make the move. I mean, the Rams have put together a roster where they've been saying where they've been like glorifying F them picks for years now. And they have a team that, quite frankly, if it doesn't snow in Philadelphia, maybe the Rams end up upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles. They're right there. The Texans aren't right there. Like they need another good draft like they had last year. They need another good day 2 like they had last year to even be able to take that next step. So there's kind of a balance there when it comes to the Texans. So
that's another element. It's like this, they had to use the draft to help fine tune 2025, obviously with an eye to 2026 and beyond. But there were things that they really needed that the draft could provide in 2025. And if they gave themselves less opportunities to do that, then they're not going to be as fulfilled. Like, I feel like they did a really good job with those first 3 picks, filling out something that they felt like was a big need for the team. And I know because we don't draft for need, yada, yada, whatever. But they needed help in the wide receiver room. They needed another offensive line body. I'd have preferred a guard, obviously, but they went and got 2 wide receivers and offensive linemen when most of us would have said when the draft started, well, they need wide receiver help and they need offensive line.
Shout out to Scotland on the soup, David White. He's got something for Cody. You ain't never Swarm. He says, Stoots, I had Bennigan. They still have Bennigans. Had Bennigans for lunch. You were right about the Monte Cristo. Only good thing in Monahan's. Where the hell is Bennigans? I remember the Monte Cristo. That was fat as hell. It's a lot, but it is very nicely done. I don't know why Bennigans didn't make it, quite frankly.
I feel like Bennigan's was just a little bit late to sort of being a long-term chain restaurant mainstay. And they still have some around. There's not a lot.
No, I did not know that.
But they still have some around. There's a couple in Iowa. There's one in Illinois. And there's one in North Dakota. And then there's 2 in Texas. There's one in Monahan's out there on I-20. And then there's one in Borger, Texas, which I believe is up in the Panhandle. So
yeah, Bennigan's has a good vibe. Cheddar's is a good spot too for like a chain that I think is very, very underappreciated. But
so the rumor is that Cheddar's purchased the recipe for the Monte Cristo from Bennigan's, and so that if you go to Cheddar's, you get pretty much the same level of Monte Cristo. That's the old.
It's
fast
too much
food.
for me now. My stomach can't handle that much. It's like eating a damn funnel cake and big ass sandwich.
I will just never forget that Bennigan's when they had like a $10 meal deal or whatever. They had a jingle and it was it stuck in the back of my head. I'll never forget it. Is where the guy, I'll put it in the comment section. I'll find it on YouTube. Put it in the comment section after the show.
Yeah, Maine at 94 says, appreciate you guys giving us truckers a shout out, man. I appreciate what you mofos do, man. Y'all got to deal with all RBS. You got to drive. You got to stay. I have nothing but respect for that. You got to unload the thing. And then, man, it's just someone load it, unload. Well, some guys already have the truck loaded. So then they do the dirty work and then they got to get there. And then when you get there, there's always like something where there's like some logistics. Well, it goes here. Oh, it goes there. It goes there. Oh, this guy's here, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, man, I finally made my destination. And now, damn it. Like I
can't find the guy with the clipboard.
Come on, man. Like, yeah, he's just like, oh, hey, how you doing? How was the drive? It's like, dude, I don't want to talk to you about the drive. So shout out to the truck drivers for real. So the rookies are going to be here this week. We'll hear from D'Amico. We'll hear from hopefully some of these guys. But I want to piggyback kind of on this Caserio talk. And I want to ask you, because we are in the business of second guessing, what are your biggest second guesses for Caserio? Because I think Caserio's done a pretty solid job. But what are your biggest second guesses for the general manager of the Texans heading into his we're in year 5, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would say that my current biggest one is the interior offensive line. I mean, he has gone about this with some intense praise for guys that are holdovers. I mean, I was reading back through, and I don't know that this is, maybe I just never registered it when he said it, but I was reading back through when he was talking about Blake Fisher a year ago, Landry, and he talked about Titus Howard, and he said Titus is a better tackle than he is a guard, and he's one of the best tackles in the league.
I remember that.
And I was just like, okay, well, here we are a couple years later.
And now he's flexing that he can play anywhere.
Well, yeah, a year ago, he's one of the best tackles in the league, and then now you're signing Cam Robinson off the street to take his spot. So, clearly that wasn't the case. But, the guys that he's decided to put together for the interior offensive line, the way he's decided to spend the money or not spend the money on the interior offensive line, that's my biggest current second guess for him. And then I would go and I would add the Jalen Petrie contract to that. That felt totally early and at the time unnecessary. So I'd add the Petrie contract to that. And then those are the two that are probably at the top of my list as far as I don't know that I agree with his moves. And I'm watching those carefully to see how he goes about fixing those things if they do indeed go wrong.
See, the Petrie thing, I've kind of talked myself into having the 3 guys on rookie deals in the secondary and there being some sort of thing. I do think there's a D'Amico factor there too, so I don't want to completely blame Nick Caserio, although Nick seems to love Jalen as much as Nick. The offensive line you have to question. It would be crazy not to question Caserio on the offensive line. I think you got to question that. I also think you got to question the manner in which I know it ended up okay, but the manner in which they lost the number 1 pick on the final week of the season. I mean, sometimes you get bailed out with the Bryce CJ thing. And quite frankly, if you thought CJ was this much better, you shouldn't even left it up to chance. I thought Brandon Cooks should have been inactive there. So I'll second guess that. But other than that, I don't have like a ton of second guesses. I think his bit just exhausts me, and this might just be a personal thing. But I think there's a bad balance of like trying to be a hardo and really making sense with some of the stuff he says when he talks about the draft and how it's not the most important thing, and then he glorifies bottom of the roster type of guys. It just starts to sound a little bit New Englandy for me. I don't know what the consequence is of that, but I just think it's a bad bit by him. And I just think there's a real weird inconsistency in that manner when it comes to Caserio. But other than that, I think he's done a fine job. I think the rebuild was good. I think the right hire was made. but the offensive line is obviously a big issue. And the biggest failure that he had, and this has to be acknowledged. So I'll put this at the top. They failed when it came to capitalizing on CJ Stroud's rookie quarterback deal. Like they failed. Like the money that they spent there was a failure. And fortunately for them, they were still pretty good, but now the real difficult work checks in. But we talked about that for a while. And when you look at it and you look at how other teams have handled that situation and really how Chicago's in the amidst handling that situation, they kind of failed miserably when it came to using the money the way that they did.
Yeah, I don't totally disagree with you. I will say they did spend, a good amount of money over on defense, and that's helped kind of elevate the defense. Daniil Hunter and Azeez Al-Shire were big contracts on defense. They went out there. But, yeah, as far as the money that they committed to some of those players on offense, yuck. I mean, those offensive linemen, they stunk.
Yeah, and you can kind of connect that to the offensive line, I guess, if you want to.
Yeah. You brought Brandon Cooks. A couple of years ago, he botched a Brandon Cooks deal that, they could have traded him. And the rumor was the Cowboys were offering a second, so that's a few years removed. And who knows what he could have done with that. He's obviously had some day 2 success, and another swing on day 2 wouldn't have been a bad thing for him. The rumor is he didn't convert the contract and make it easy to facilitate the deal in time, and he ran out of time, and he just kind of botched that. So that's one that you could sort of, and then the contract adjustment for Stephon Diggs was a weird one that still has never been explained.
Kind of interesting.
But as far as what's on the roster, the O-line's the top, and it'll be the top for a long time.
It's O-line, yeah. Kyle Nance says, shout out from Minnesota. Shout out to you. He also says, yup, preloaded. We call it, drop it, and hook it in. Okay, so you got that's big time truck driving right there. So
yeah, I feel like that's what you got to do. I feel like you got to earn your way up to that. They probably don't give that job to the new guys.
As far as Nick Caserio being on some sort of hot seat, I don't think that exists.
Oh no.
And the trade, the miscalculated trade. Now, I will say this, and this is just because jackasses like us do this type of thing, but if Atlanta ends up being the worst team in football this year, and then it's the number 1 overall pick, then we will revisit this discussion, and we'll probably have serious questions about it. But for the time being, we'll just look at it as a first-round pick.
I will be fascinated to see exactly where that pick lands, because Atlanta took it down to the wire. They took it down to the wire on almost making the playoffs. It was the final few weeks of the season that decided who won that awful, terrible, no good, very bad division of football. And they should be a little bit better team. I don't like Michael Penix, but they seem to. So, if that ends up as a pick in the 20s, the Texans got a 3rd round pick from the Giants, which should be a lot closer to the 2nd than the 4th. It won't be that big of a gap. It'll obviously be a gap. And again, I'm not here to tell you 2/3 is better than 1/1. That's not what I'm doing. I want everybody to be very clear, but I certainly understand from their line of thinking, having 3/3 versus having less thirds, is what they wanted, ultimately what they desired out of this draft.
Yep, what's what they figured out. So that's the Albert Breer report.
I saw a video from Eric DeCosta, and I wanted to kind of run this theory by you, Landry. Eric DeCosta is the GM for the Ravens, and he gets a lot of credit for some of the stuff that he's done.
He's also criticism lately.
He also had, yeah. Ironically, this interview took place before Justin Tucker got cut, but his theory on the draft is that really no player is that much better than any other player when it comes to the draft. So you should just give yourself as many swings in the draft and try to diversify the type of players that you pick.
One of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
Instead of just trying to stick to, we only draft this type of player. We only want this type of player.
So no player is better that's what he's saying?
No, he's saying that
he's essentially, is it like a different way of saying the 50-50 Caserio thing?
No, he's saying that look at how many times players have been drafted high and they haven't been any good, and players drafted below them have been better. Why would you then take your draft picks, take away opportunities to make picks, and move up significantly for players when you can't guarantee?
He's basically saying color up the chips. Trade the black chip for a bunch of 5 chips. Or keep the chips as much as possible if you can. Like get it, color it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean the more, and I mean they have a good, I mean they have a good track. And quite frankly, I think the Texans, I'm not going to sit there and say they're the Baltimore Ravens, but the draft we always point to for the Baltimore Ravens was, what was it, 18, where they traded up to the final pick of the first round for Lamar Jackson, and then they got Mark Andrews and they got Orlando Brown in day 2, and that was kind of like as good as it got, like for a draft. So like it does feel like these day 2 picks, I don't want to say they're safer, but it just feels like, I don't know, there's like a comfort level with me in day 2.
The Ravens, it feels like, typically have pretty big draft classes. Every now and then they have a little bit less, but I mean, they drafted 9 guys this year. They drafted 11 guys in 2022. They drafted 8 guys in 2021, 10 guys in 2020. So he continues to just give himself, swings, I guess. And I think it's funny where he says, like, trading up and taking away opportunities, we don't value that because we'll just pick a player that comes to us in that range, because are they really that much better than this? And then I kind of thought about it. I was like, well, Caserio, he just kind of squanders value sometimes to go in and getting guys that he really wants. And it's like, DaCosta pretty damn good at this. He operates in a totally different way than Caserio does. Now, obviously, they operate in totally different situations too.
Yeah, I also think Caserio has like this obsessive, like, I think he takes like a good philosophy, and I think sometimes he overdoes it. And like, I think that there's like wanting to get your guy, and then there's like, okay, that guy was going to come to you no matter what. Like, I don't know. Like, it's one thing to, like, if you're sitting at, let's go back to the conversation we were having. Like, if you're sitting with the 25th pick in the draft and you want Matthew Golden and you have to go up to 19 and get your guy, that makes sense. But when you want Jalen Smith out of USC, like, were you not going to get him?
Throw away a 5th round pick to move up 5 spots.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think that Nick sometimes, and I guess you can say D'Amico, because D'Amico's in the room and stuff, but sometimes it does feel like there's a difference between we got to get our guy and we're not, we're not being a little bit reckless with the whole situation. I was thinking about Caserio the other day too, because I think in the last maybe 6 months, the Brady and Belichick conversation was always like, I thought it was kind of unfair how, Tom Brady leaves New England, then he wins a Super Bowl, and all of a sudden it's like, well, Bill Belichick's a loser and all this type of stuff. Because I think as far as being like an in-game coach, I think Bill Belichick proved himself, and I think that entire Patriot staff kind of proved themselves. But you kind of watch everything that's happened lately, and maybe the Belichick girlfriend thing kind of has me feeling a little bit weird. But I was watching the Brady 6, and like, I think one of the most telling things about that was, if you go look at every other draft pick that the Patriots made that year, literally, like, none of those guys lasted over like 2 years in the league. And a lot of them didn't even make the roster, and they ended up like drafting they ended up drafting Brady, and that kind of saved their ass. And if you look at their draft history wasn't that great. So I do wonder, like, how much of that philosophy Caserio even really carries with him, like as far as like the Patriot way and the Texans and stuff like that. And this is just kind of random talk, but there's always like a sense of like the Patriot way being hard. I don't know that there's any like connections. And I think that I think the Patriot way's kind of been damaged lately, to be honest with you.
Well, you find out the Patriot way's a lot easier to do when you have Tom Brady. You can go draft some guy out of Rutgers nobody's ever heard of and not be a big deal, because Tom Brady goes out there and wins football games. And that's one of the things too that's kind of scary about this offensive line, because we kind of I use New England as a reference point when they had Marcus Cannon, who was a 6th rounder, and Shaq Mason, who was a 4th rounder, and Joe Thuney was a 3rd rounder, and David Andrews, who was an undrafted free agent, as their offensive lineman. Yeah, Brady made offensive linemen look a lot better than they actually were. And I'm not saying that all those guys sucked. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But he made those guys a lot better than other quarterbacks would have made those guys look, with the way that he operated and how good he was. So it's like, yeah, I get that they made some late round guys successful from a coaching standpoint. The quarterback also made some late round guys successful too.
Yeah, he did. Definitely. So second guessing Caserio, let us know where you second guess Caserio. Rookies this week. Tomorrow will be the final day before the storm of rookies amidst the storm here in H-Town. Appreciate everyone for rolling through. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along. And be sure to always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Good. Be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. And I put the Ben Against commercial that I was telling everybody about in the chat, so you can watch that while this is over.